The sound of laughter cut through the dry Arizona desert air as the old 1978 Yamaha RD400 creaked to a stop at the bikers' gathering spot. "Look at that rust bucket," Marcus laughed, pointing at the worn-out motorcycle. "What a disgrace to us bikers." At 75, Jack Miller climbed off the bike with difficulty. The laughter grew louder when they saw his plain clothes, a sharp contrast to the others around him. "Grandpa, did you get lost?" Another biker mocked, slapping the side of the tank. Jack stayed silent, adjusting his tattered vest. Then Ralph Collins, the group's leader, noticed something on Jack's jacket, a military patch, faded with time. His hands began to tremble. The laughter died in his throat. That symbol, he knew it all too well. Ralph kept his eyes fixed on that patch, as if he needed to be sure of what he was seeing. Then he noticed the same symbol, larger, across the back of Jack's jacket. That was all the confirmation he needed. The laughter in the hot desert air began to fade, swallowed by the heavy silence settling over the place. Without a word, Ralph brushed Marcus's hand away from the Yamaha's tank. "Enough," he said in a firm, dry tone. Marcus pulled his hand back as if the metal were burning hot. Jack stood still, steady, with the calm of someone who had faced far harsher stares. His posture didn't ask for forgiveness, nor did it seek approval. Ralph took a step forward. "Where did you get that?" he asked, pointing at the patch. Jack lowered his head slightly, as if choosing his words carefully while remembering his past. "I served in the U.S. Army Special Forces. I got this jacket from a friend after we served together." A low murmur ran through some of the group, but Ralph stayed quiet for a few seconds before he spoke. "My father served with the Green Berets. Not everyone values what you did, or the price you paid." "Come," Ralph said, motioning toward a wooden table under the shade of a tree at the edge of the yard. Jack followed without hurry, carrying his helmet in his left hand. They sat across from each other. Ralph leaned his elbows on the table. Jack placed the helmet beside him as if it were part of him. "That bike." Ralph glanced toward the Yamaha. "Looks like it's seen more miles than all of us put together." Jack allowed a faint smile. "Maybe it has. Since the day I came back home, it's been my way of moving forward." The distant hum of an engine passing on the highway filled the pause. Ralph didn't interrupt. "At night," Jack went on, "when sleep wouldn't come, or when it came with bad memories, I'd start her up and ride. The road never asked questions." Ralph listened intently. This wasn't small talk. It was a piece of a life laid bare on the table. "I kept it when I found work, when I got married, and I kept it after it all ended," Jack said. "All of it?" Ralph asked. "The marriage, the house, the routine." "Only she stayed," Jack answered. The other bikers began to gather around, curious. No one was laughing anymore. Even Marcus, who had mocked him earlier, stayed quiet, eyes fixed on the ground. Ralph stood and walked over to the bike. He ran his hand along the side, feeling the worn paint and the scratches. The marks weren't just from use, they were from time. "Has it ever let you down?" he asked, his eyes still on the motorcycle. Jack stepped closer. "Never in a way I couldn't fix by the side of the road. She still runs fine. Maybe she's not the fastest, but she takes me where I need to go." Jack picked up his helmet. "It was good meeting you." He climbed onto his old bike, turned the key, and the engine roared to life. Dust rose into the air as he revved it and rode off the same way he had come. The group stayed frozen, watching his figure disappear around the bend in the road. Ralph kept his gaze on the horizon a while longer, as if trying to piece together a puzzle. Then he turned back to the group. He didn't say a word. He just grabbed a cup of coffee from the table nearby and stood there in silence. Marcus stepped closer, hesitant. "Boss, who was that guy?" Ralph took a sip before answering. "Someone who stands for something you wouldn't understand." Some sat down, others drifted away, but the image of Jack on that weathered Yamaha RD400 stayed etched in Ralph Collins's memory. And Ralph, more than anyone else there, knew that this encounter wasn't over. Something inside him had shifted, and though he never said it out loud, he already knew this wouldn't be the last time he saw Jack Miller. The next morning, the bikers' meeting spot was quieter than usual. Ralph arrived early, parked his Harley-Davidson lowrider, and spent a few minutes just staring at the road, as if he expected to see dust rise, announcing Jack's arrival. But Jack never showed. While the group scattered to get ready for the day's ride, Ralph remained silent. He wasn't a man easily impressed, but something about that encounter stuck in his mind. Miles away, Jack was in his garage. The space was small, almost entirely taken up by the Yamaha, and a few shelves lined with old tools. He worked slowly, carefully cleaning the carburetor. A radio played softly in the background, an old song from the 70s filling the air with memories he refused to let slip away. Jack wiped down the tank. The paint, once a bright red, was now faded, almost gray. Even so, there was pride in seeing how well it had endured so many roads. When he finished, he sat on a wooden bench and simply looked at the bike, as if waiting for it to tell him something. 2 days later, Jack was back on the road. The sky was clear, and the desert heat was already building early in the day. The Yamaha answered the turn of the key with its familiar roar. He had no set destination, he never did. He just chose a direction and let the rest unfold. That's how he found himself nearing the bikers' meeting spot again. From a distance, he saw the rows of motorcycles, chrome gleaming under the sun. He wasn't sure he wanted to stop, but something made him ease off the throttle. As he rolled into the yard, a few heads turned. There was no laughter this time, only watchful eyes. Ralph was standing, talking to 2 riders, but he broke off when he saw him. "Jack," he said, as if the name alone were enough to call him over. Jack parked off to the side, got off the bike, and removed his helmet. "Just passing through," he said, making it clear he didn't plan to stay long. "Then sit for a while," Ralph replied, pointing to a table. The atmosphere was different now. There was no hint of scorn. On the contrary, some even tried to act casual, as if not wanting to show too much curiosity. "Have you always been in Arizona?" Ralph asked, trying to start a conversation. "For the last 20 years, yes. Before that, I moved across 3 different states." The 2 spent the next few hours talking, about the past and about their shared passion for motorcycles. Then they sat in silence for a while, simply watching things unfold around them. For Jack, there was no rush. For Ralph, that quiet time only confirmed what he already felt. This was a man of simple worth, and maybe for that very reason, he deserved to be honored. When Jack stood to leave, Ralph watched as he turned the key, waiting a moment before revving, listening to the engine respond. Ralph already had a plan in mind, and somehow he knew their next meeting would be unforgettable. As soon as Jack left, Ralph cleared his throat and called out to his friends, "I need your attention." The men went quiet. "That man you saw the other day, the one I was just talking to, Jack Miller. Well, let me explain who he is." Ralph looked around, making sure every eye was on him. For the next few minutes, everyone listened closely as their leader and friend spoke about a 75-year-old man they barely knew, yet already respected. Marcus, the one who had mocked him the most, now kept his eyes down in shame. "That old bike he rides," Ralph went on, "is his story, and we were fools enough to laugh at it." The silence grew heavier. "So here's what we're going to do," Ralph said firmly. "We're going to restore the bike, piece by piece, paint, engine, everything. And we're going to give it back to him the way he deserves." A murmur of surprise rippled through the group. Some exchanged looks, but no one dared to argue. Dwayne, one of the oldest members, spoke first. "I know a guy in Tucson who still works with original parts for that Yamaha model. Might be pricey, but he knows what he's doing." "I can handle the tires," another offered. "I'll take care of the paint," Marcus said, maybe as a way of redeeming himself. Ralph nodded with satisfaction. That's what I wanted to hear. Meanwhile, Jack went on with his routine, completely unaware. He spent his days at home, switching between small repairs, old books, and short rides down the highway. At night, he sat on the porch, staring at the stars. The bike stayed parked by the garage, always ready for another trip. Ralph, meanwhile, was writing down every detail: where to get the parts, who would handle each step, how long it would take. He didn't want mistakes. One evening, he gathered everyone in the group's garage. Spread across a large table were sketches and lists. "We'll need coordination. Jack can't suspect a thing until it's finished." "And how do we get the bike without him noticing?" Marcus asked. Ralph drew in a deep breath. "I'll talk to him. I'll come up with an excuse. Maybe tell him I want to check the engine, offer some help. He'll resist, but I'll find a way." No one doubted him. If anyone could convince Jack, it was Ralph. 2 days later, Ralph managed to track Jack down. It wasn't hard. Everyone on the local roads knew that Yamaha. All it took was a question at a gas station outside town, and they pointed him in the right direction. That's how Ralph found the small house at the end of a back road. Jack was on the porch drinking coffee, with the Yamaha resting beside him. "Good morning, Jack," Ralph said, shutting off his Harley-Davidson and walking closer. Jack raised his eyebrows, surprised. "Ralph, wasn't expecting company out here. How'd you find me?" "Your bike gives you away, Jack," Ralph replied with a faint smile. "I asked in town, and everybody knew who you were." Jack let out a short laugh, shaking his head. "Guess it gets more attention than I'd like." Ralph rested his hands on the porch railing. "I stopped by to see how you've kept that machine running after all these years." He pointed to the Yamaha. "Not everyone can keep a bike like that on the road for decades." Jack looked at the motorcycle as if it were an old companion. Patience, makeshift parts, and a lot of care. Nothing more. "But look, I noticed the tires are pretty worn, and I think the carburetor might be acting up. I've got a mechanic friend in Tucson who knows this model inside and out. If you want, I can take it to him. Have him give it a quick check. Just some basic adjustments, so she runs better and safer." Jack stayed silent for a few seconds. "I've thought about having it serviced, but I've never trusted just anyone to touch it." Ralph nodded. "I get that, but this guy's solid. I promise I'll bring it back the same, only better." Jack sighed, still hesitant, but finally gave a slow nod. "All right, but treat it like it's yours." "You can count on that, Jack. She'll be in good hands." Ralph smiled, knowing this was the first step in the plan he had been carefully building with the group. Ralph called a friend to pick up the old bike in the back of a pickup truck. Jack watched in silence until the motorcycle disappeared down the road. He trusted Ralph, but still felt a tightness in his chest, as if he'd handed over part of his own soul. Meanwhile, at the group's garage, the atmosphere was entirely different. The bike was carefully dismantled, piece by piece, as if they were handling sacred relics. The men worked in shifts, each one taking on a responsibility. Marcus, who had once mocked Jack, volunteered for the hardest job, sanding down the paint, stripping away years of dust and rust. Dwayne, with his old contacts in Tucson, tracked down original parts, some hard to find. Others were in charge of polishing the metal, tuning the engine, and restoring the chrome details. And Ralph, always watchful, coordinated everything, constantly reminding them, "We're not just working on a motorcycle, we're working on a man's life. Respect that." The days went by quickly. Jack, unaware of what was happening, believed his bike was simply being serviced. A few times he thought about calling Ralph, but something held him back. Maybe it was newfound trust, maybe the sense that he could still wait a little longer. Finally, on a Saturday afternoon, the work was done. The motorcycle gleamed as if it had just rolled out of the factory, yet it hadn't lost its soul from decades on the road. This wasn't about erasing its history, but about honoring it. "It's time," Ralph said, looking at the group. "Let's show him." Ralph drove back to Jack's house. He found the veteran sitting on the porch, as always. "Ralph," Jack said, raising his eyebrows, "I was starting to think you'd forgotten about me." Ralph chuckled. "Never. In fact, I wanted to invite you on a ride today, but you'll have to trust me one more time." Jack narrowed his eyes, but agreed. He put on his vest, slipped into his worn boots, and climbed onto the back of Ralph's Harley, not knowing what awaited him. Minutes later, they arrived at the meeting spot. The rumble of several motorcycles echoed through the air. Jack stepped down, puzzled, as he noticed everyone staring his way. The group parted, revealing something covered by a dark tarp in the center, his Yamaha RD 400. Ralph gave a signal. 2 bikers pulled the cover away, revealing the fully restored motorcycle. The metallic red shone under the sun and the polished engine gleamed like a mirror. Jack raised a hand to his mouth. His eyes welled up. He took a few slow steps, hardly believing what he was seeing. His hand brushed the handlebars, the tank. But how? Ralph placed a hand on his shoulder. How doesn't matter. What matters is that you deserve this, Jack. That bike is part of who you are, and we had the honor of taking care of it. The silence was broken by the roar of engines starting up together. Ralph then raised his voice. Today, the one leading this convoy is Mr. Jack Miller. For a moment, Jack hesitated, but then he put on his helmet, climbed onto the restored bike, and turned the key. The engine roared, strong, steady like the old days. The group cheered. As Jack accelerated and took the lead, the wind hit his face. In that moment, no one saw him as just an old man with an outdated motorcycle anymore. He was a man of honor, who hadn't lost his worth with time. A man who carried scars but still stood tall, and just like his faithful 1978 two-wheeled companion, was ready to keep moving forward 1 mile at a time. If you enjoyed this story, click the like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next.